Hi guys, welcome to Snakes and Adders. Today we're continuing our advancing series by discussing these, which are Burmese pythons. Burmese pythons used to be classed in a group of 3 species. It was called the Melurus complex, or the Melurus group. The nominate form was the Indian python, which was Python melurus melurus. There was the Burmese python, which is Python melurus bivittatus. And then there was the Sri Lankan or tiger python, which was Python melurus pimbura. The largest of the group is the Burmese. They classically are one of the members of the Big Five. Big Five being green anaconda, reticulated python, African rock python, amethystine python, and these. And we would group the Indians and Sri Lankans in with these as the classic Melurus group. So they've now been reclassified. They are Python bivittatus. And then they have another subspecies, which is the dwarf Burmese python, which is Python bivittatus progchi. The Burmese python's got a wider range than you would think. They naturally occur in India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam. But Myanmar, previously Burma, is the type locality and hence where the name came from. They love sources of water. They naturally occur near water sources, so grasslands, marsh, swamp, woodlands and river valleys. They are fast growing snakes. These are both CB16. The albino is probably about, 7.5 feet, maybe even approaching 8 feet. And the normal Burmese is probably 6.5, approaching 7 feet. When they're born, they're a little over 35 centimetres long. They'll take a medium mouse as their first meal. When they're first born, they're born with big yolk sacs. There can be a delay in getting them feeding. It can take 2-3 months for this yolk sac to be absorbed before they start to develop an appetite and want to start feeding. When they do start feeding, they feed well and they grow fast. And everything shits and giggles with the babies until we reach this sort of size. Predominantly, most of the ads that you will see online will be for snakes this size. This isn't a coincidence. When you're setting up your baby, people will either raise them in rubs or maybe in a 4-foot vivarium. This is relatively easily got. It's an off-the-shelf viv. It's easily sorted out with heating. We'd either use a ceramic or a spot bulb on a day-night thermostat, and everything's fine for that first 12-15 months. Then suddenly we get to this stage. Now, these guys have now outgrown that 4-foot viv and are in need of their transition up into their adult viv. That's where the wheels come off, and for a lot of giants that's where the wheels come off, because these aren't particularly high value snakes. This albino is 125 pounds. The normal Burmese is 75 pounds. So then when you sort of say to somebody, right, well, we need to construct a custom built 8-foot vivarium that's maybe 2 or 3 feet high, 2 or 3 feet deep. We're going to need ceramics at one side for our hotspot. We may even need something like a advanced heating system from microclimate, which is a radiant panel heater to maintain our ambient. We're going to need the branches and logs and plants and everything to keep the animals happy so that they've got a bit of enrichment in their viv. And you're looking down the barrel of a price of anything from £400 or £500 up to £1,000, depending on how extreme you want to go with it. That's where, suddenly, and I want a new car. We need to go on holiday this year. We can't afford it, let's just sell the snake. And that's a real shame. You knew what you were doing when you were buying the baby. You promised the earth, said that you were going to commit to it for life, and then suddenly they're all for sale. Most of the animals from the giants that you see advertised, you will see some adverts for babies, but predominantly it will be animals between 8 and 10 feet long that have now got to go up into that massive adult tank with all the custom costs and the bespoke requirements that a custom viv entails, and they don't want to know. Nowhere has this been more evident than in Florida, in the Everglades, where the pet trade has really kicked the local ecology in the nuts, because all of these idiot keepers that decided that they no longer wanted to keep them, or they didn't want to pay out the money for that custom viv, decided to just let them go. So they're now competing actively with the local alligators. They eat the baby alligators, the adult alligators eat some of the Burmese. They're attacking the local mammalian populations, they're attacking the local bird populations, and they're actively breeding. Burmese aren't the only species out there. There's also retics wandering the Everglades, and green iguanas, and you know, guess what, we're now in a situation where yes, it's the pet trade that has done that to us. In the UK, obviously, it's a far less easy to just release them into the wild. We don't have the climate. That doesn't stop some people. We only shared last month a link to a news report from 2 or 3 years ago where a 14-foot, 15-foot retic had been dumped in a local canal. So it just goes to show that there are those idiots over here as well. The commitment that you need long term to the giants is not to be underestimated. These are still babies. These are good sized snakes. They're powerful and strong. They're lovely and tame and easily enough to work with, but you know, they are still tiddlers. This is nothing. You know, the adult size of these animals, there is some sexual diversity, dimorphism, where you've got the males. They're going to reach maybe anything from 8 to 11 feet and might weigh anything from 7 to 10 kilos. The females are far larger, and you're going to be hitting anything from 13 to 16 feet, and they could weigh anything from 35 to 60 kilos. Back in 2006, we bred Burmese pythons, and I weighed our female whilst heavily pregnant, and she came in at 70 kilos, and she had 52 eggs, 38 of which were fertile that year. So obviously there's a fair amount of egg weight there, but that's still a huge snake. She was probably approaching 16 feet in length, and she ate piglets. So let's just put that in perspective. As a giant keeper or a prospective giant keeper, where will you find piglets? Where will you find a regular supply of broiler chickens, of giant rabbits? These are all questions that you need to have answered prior to committing and buying and going into keeping Burmese. To brumate them, we generally give them a slightly cooler night, which is longer. So it'd go from, say, a normal 12-12 cycle where our day and night are split, to mid-brumation, giving them 15-16 hours of night and 8 hours of daytime. The days are slightly hotter, so we'd go from, say, 32 to 33 or 34 degrees Celsius, and the nighttime temperatures would normally be 28 degrees Celsius, and they drop off to about 26, maybe even 25. That will go on for a couple of months. We're going to gently reduce them down. We introduce them halfway through this period, say about 3-4 weeks in, and breeding trials will start. They'll maintain at this cooler, longer night and shorter, hotter day cycle for maybe another 4 or 5 weeks. Then we slowly start to bring them back up. And then once they're back up to full temperature, we're going to heavily feed that female. We keep the breeding trials going, offering the male in maybe for 2 or 3 days and then coming out. And we're waiting for that ovulation from the female, which is a huge swelling that looks like somebody's put a clown's balloon up its bum and blown it up, because they just explode and they just look huge. They'll start to roll and expose their bellies, and they'll sun their stomachs underneath their basking spot a lot more, and this is to try and expose the eggs and aid development. Generally, incubation is going to be about 65 days at 32 degrees Celsius. Do not cut your eggs. I see all these videos of idiots ragging babies out of eggs with their fingers. It's barbaric, it's unnecessary. These animals are born with an egg tooth. This, to me, if they don't want to crawl out the egg, or they haven't got the tools to crawl out the egg, that could just be a sign of a congenital defect, and nature has decided this animal was not supposed to live. So don't mess about with nature. It's not necessarily. They will hatch themselves, they will crawl out the eggs themselves. Once they've pipped, they may sit in the egg for up to 48 hours, absorbing the albumin and the yolk. That will go into through that umbilical cord that they've got on their belly, and then they'll come out. They may have got a little trail of umbilical cord stuck off their stomach. Within a week, generally, this is going to dry off. We keep them nice and humid when they first come out, because we don't want any dryness or infection to get into that umbilical scar. As tiddlers, as with all baby pythons, they do appreciate slightly higher humidity. This can relax fully when full grown, and the animals can be kept at nominal humidity apart from when they're shedding their skin, and generally we would spray them. This is probably as a result of multiple generations of captive breeding. The Burmese pythons have been kept probably the longest out of all the giants. They were the first to give us some colour phasers and colour morphs, and I know that Paul, who works here at N.E.R.D with me, I think he bred albinos back in about, I don't know, 88, 90, something like that. May have even been sooner, no doubt he'll come on and correct me. but that's how long they've sort of been around, so many years. With the subsequent generations, what this has done is obviously calm the animals down. Wild-caught animals are usually psychopathic, very defensive. They don't like being touched, messed with, handled in any way. And through subsequent generations of captive breeding, then this sort of relaxes and they become calmer and they become tamer and easier to work with. Burmese pythons are incredibly laid-back snakes. Of the giants, they are the obvious choice. So if you've been keeping maybe 5-10 years, you've had 2 or 3 species, you maybe run through carpets or boa constrictors and other stuff, and you want that challenge, you want to go up to a giant, my advice would be a Burmese every day of the week. That said, one must seriously consider the long-term implications of having a giant species. This is not something to be taken lightly. It's not something, sorry, just getting choked, not something where you do it on a whim and decide, oh yeah, it's great good, I've always wanted one, so I'm going to get one. Because I can guarantee you will be one of those people that once it reaches that 8-foot mark, 10-foot mark, and it needs its big custom viv, maybe if not sooner, you're going to be the one that puts it on Gumtree because you don't want to commit to that kind of value. You don't want to invest that kind of money, even though you've took the time to grow it onto that stage. It's just common sense. All these videos, any of the videos, particularly the advanced stuff, they are all appealing to people's common sense, whether that be with green anacondas, whether that be with retics. But the most common choice is the Burmese. The common sense choice is a Burmese, as it will be the easiest to raise. It doesn't seem to have the propensity to be getting the respiratory infections that the Burmese do. They don't have the fasting periods and sometimes irascible nature of the green anaconda. The African rock python is a real handful and only for the most dedicated of keepers, and unfortunately when they come in, they still come in as imports, so they're generally mental, but they're cheap, you know, like the budgie, 40-50 quid, throwaway money, and unfortunately people treat them as such, raise them to a certain standard, realise that they've bit off more than they can chew because this thing is nailing them every time they go in the viv, and therefore again they end up on Gumtree as predictable as ever. Basking temperature 32 degrees, ambient temperature of 29 to 30 degrees, cool end temperature of 26 to 27 degrees. We would keep them on orchid bark. This would allow us to spray them once they come up to shed, but like I say, once they're grown on, the humidity requirements do drop off. The adults, there's not so much of an issue with their day-to-day humidity. It's merely when they're shedding their skin that we're going to spray them, raise the humidity. You need to think about the adult water containers, how you're going to get them in and out of the tank. They don't have the same water requirements as green anaconda, but these are considerable snakes. They may try to bathe, they may spill their water. Is your custom vivarium sealed? Is it going to rot in 5 minutes because every time you put the water bowl in, these kids are jumping in and all the water's jumping out? And that's obviously then going to mean that things are going to need replacing. So you need to think about sealing and setting up the tank properly. Definitely do not take this lightly. As cool as these are, as beautiful as these are, as many shares as this is going to get and likes and reactions and everything else on Facebook, they are snakes, they are our pets, they do deserve our long-term attention, our long-term affection, and they have requirements that we must provide. If you do not think carefully about the long-term implications of keeping a giant, you will come unstuck and you will just perpetuate a problem that goes on in the hobby. We will keep the videos coming. We're still trying to work through a lot of different species. We have got loads more to do with regards to issues of whether it's husbandry, politics within the hobby, all sorts of stuff. With loads of stuff that we will get to. Thanks for the continued support. Visit the website, which is www.snakesandAdders.co.uk, to see what we're all about. And thanks again for the support. Cheers.